it's that serious. Listen, I'm not going to let Toni off the hook here. This is the second time I'm noticing that someone who's supposed to be her friend isn't really supporting her. What could have been a cute night was really ruined by ineffective communication. Toni was really interested in his money. She would tell you herself.
And you want to get married?
Sure. Why not?
Because you didn't want to get married.
Well, no, not when it's being crammed down a brother's throat.
Hey you, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, welcome. My name is Jenny and I'm a licensed psychotherapist. Today we're talking all about communication, moochers, and jealousy that happened in Girlfriends of the show. So if you're interested, please keep on watching. The first episode opens up with Maya at the front desk and Joan is coming in. It's her birthday. Maya presents her with a gift. They kind of giggle, they laugh. This is to show that they seem to be getting along very well as people that work with each other. Joan enters her office where she is greeted with beautiful flowers. And these flowers are from this guy that she's been dating. As she opens the card, she sees that the card basically says, "Hey, I'm getting back together with my ex." And that really disappoints Joan. And as I'm watching, it seems like she's someone who really yearns for a relationship. I do think that this person was terrible for doing this, breaking up with her via flowers on her birthday. Like, could have waited for the next day maybe or something else. I felt like that wasn't right. And clearly Joan is disappointed. Maya comes into the office and Maya doesn't really comfort Joan. She really kind of blames her like, yuck, you're single on your birthday? That's sad. This is definitely not the best way to comfort a friend who's just experienced something that was a little embarrassing and unkind. She could have found a better way to comfort her. It was insensitive, Maya. Sure, you can laugh with your friends and joke about it later, maybe a couple years later, but not in the moment. This is the time to really comfort your friend, provide those affirmative words and be kind to them. You know, it's their birthday and somebody just broke up with them. Come on, girl. But Joan doesn't just take it. She is sure to correct Maya and her grammar. Is this Joan showing Maya who's really boss here, who's in charge by that subtle, "Oh, you didn't say that grammatically correct"? The conversation continues and Maya then asks Joan, "Well, what do you plan to do?" And Joan says, "I'm going to keep praying for my Denzel knockoff," which was a little sad. Maya then goes on to tell Joan that basically, your standards are too high. You need to bring them back down. Lower them. Maya also says that there are plenty of good men around. But the biggest question here is, what is Maya's definition of a good man, and does that align with Joan's definition? While words can certainly have this base definition that we can all agree on, how we apply that to our lives is certainly our own. What you think is good may not be good for me. You might say, okay, good is positive, but your good may not be positive for me. Joan then goes to her Rolodex of possible quote unquote good men. And unfortunately, none of them match what she would say are good versus what Maya would say, hey, actually, that is a good man. We are later introduced to Toni and Lynn. Lynn seems to be living with Toni, but not for long, because it looks like Toni is setting some pretty strict boundaries with her by saying, hey, you've been living with me for this long. It's time for you to exit. You have to go. I'd like to hear from you in the comments. Would you be able to live with a friend or have a friend come live with you? This is such a hard topic. Sure, you want to support your friend. You want to be there for them. But living with someone can get hard and quickly. To ensure that you're living with someone who respects boundaries, it's important that you set them and you set them together. And please do all of that before you move in together. Well-intentioned support can turn really nasty. It's very important to determine when this friend needs to move out and how they'll support around the home. And this needs to be detailed. And also what will be done if rules aren't followed or whatever the case may be. This might sound very strict, but it's that serious because in my time as a person, as a social worker, I've seen negative things happen from people who are living together. And it doesn't always have to be bad or negative. Toni is being really strict with her boundaries here. And it isn't like Lynn doesn't really have anywhere to go. It seems like Joan is willing to take her in. It is really important for Lynn to start working on a way of how she will obtain housing on her own. She seems able-bodied and is very college educated. Lynn and Toni kind of go back and forth having fun and they're chatting together. I love that even though Toni is really saying you have to go, they're still being friends with each other and they're being friendly, because that's important, that you're able to feel comfortable enough to set a boundary with your friend, someone you love, someone you trust. Because what's a bestie if you can't have those hard conversations with them? So as they move on in the conversation, Toni shares with Lynn that she is dating Charles, and Charles is Joan's ex. Joan and Toni and Lynn and Maya are friends. Lynn is quickly and sure to tell her that that's not appropriate. Lynn is saying, while her and Toni are both like, I don't care if you date my ex, Joan is not the same way. Lynn tells her she needs to tell Joan to make sure that Joan is okay with it. But Toni's all like, oh, Joan's not going to care. She broke up with him. No hard feelings there. Yada, yada, yada. But Lynn is insisting anyway. And like I mentioned before, Toni and Lynn agree that they both subscribe to that free love about dating your ex. They don't care about that. But they say that Joan subscribes to Essence, where they don't. Is this girl code? I think so. From Lynn's point of view anyway. She's protecting both of her friends. She's protecting Joan from finding this out on her birthday night. And she's also protecting Toni from Joan being upset with her. So in that scenario, she is being a really good girlfriend. I do think it's important that if you are dating someone that your friend dated, that you should probably have a conversation, sit down with your friend and say, hey, this is the person I'm dating, yada, yada. And you let them know, even if you are both okay with it. This is just basic communication and effective communication too. Lynn ends up forcing Toni to tell Joan, and when Joan picks up the phone and they talk about this, Joan pretends that she's okay. I could immediately tell that Joan was not okay with Toni dating Charles, because her shoulders dropped, her voice dropped, and you could see in her face that she wasn't really happy. But again, they're having a phone conversation. So Toni may not have been able to see her face, but I'm wondering if Toni could have heard in her voice how disappointed that she was in Toni dating her ex. What do you think? Let me know in the comments if you've seen this episode, or if you're interested in going back to rewatch. I'd like to hear what you think. Now, I'm not Joan's bestie like Toni is, but I could clearly see in her face and hear in her voice that she wasn't really happy about this. So why couldn't Toni see that too? Was Toni that self-absorbed? Was Toni that preoccupied with not wanting her to be unhappy about the situation because she wanted to keep dating Charles, that she kind of wanted to ignore it? Is there a possibility that Toni already had her mind made up about the answer she wanted from Joan, so she heard basically what she wanted to hear? That's a possibility. Anyway, Joan lies, says she's okay with it when she's clearly not. And there goes communication. These are two best friends. If your best friend does something to you that you're not happy with, shouldn't you be able to communicate that with them? Shouldn't you be able to let your best friend know that, hey, what you did there, that hurt me? I think you should be able to tell your friends when they've hurt you. Because the thing is, the friend might not be trying to intentionally hurt you, but if they have hurt you, you should be open to communicating that with them so that this doesn't happen going forward. Yes, it can be hard to be honest about your wants, your desires, but you must be honest, or you'll end up resenting the very people you call family. The show then pans to exactly what happened between Joan and Charles. She wanted marriage. He didn't. This ended things. This is the most straightforward conversation I've seen in the show, even though Joan isn't happy with the outcome. Joan is so uncomfortable with the idea of being dateless to her own party that she ropes William into being her date. And William is a co-worker and friend from work. In my opinion, had she been honest with Toni about the fact that she didn't like her dating Charles, they could have had this wonderful girls' night in with their libations, with their snacks, appetizers, and such. But direct communication is hard, and it's hard for a lot of us. But it's the skill we must practice. Later at Joan's party, she comes out looking very beautiful, and her girls are hyping her up. She looks great. It's her birthday. But the first person she brings up is Charles, because again, she was not happy with Toni's decision to date Charles. So that's fresh on her mind. And she just broke up with this guy she's dating, so she's feeling extra lonely with people at the party having dates, and she doesn't. In my mind, I was like, Joan, it's your birthday. Please, let's toast to something fun. Let's toast to this new chapter in your life. William and Charles come in, and Joan is forced to pretend that Williams is her date, just because she didn't want to be upfront with Toni about her not liking that she's dating Charles. Listen, I'm not going to let Toni off the hook here, because if this is somebody that's been your bestie for this many years, I think you should be able to kind of see when they're sad, disappointed about something. Shouldn't you know your bestie enough to know when they'd be uncomfortable with a certain arrangement? Or is that just me? Joan goes on to focus the rest of the night on Toni and Charles's love. And her friend William isn't even helping her. He's basically trying to make her picture scenarios of Toni and Charles in the future. Scenarios that are clearly upsetting her. This is the second time I'm noticing that someone who's supposed to be her friend isn't really supporting her in a time where she's possibly feeling unloved. Maya comes into the kitchen and she learns that Toni is in fact dating Joan's ex. And if you know Maya, she's married and she doesn't like that. She feels like that's not girl code. Maya ends up telling Toni while shading her, basically. Then Joan insults Toni too. Instead of talking about what's really going on, they continue to dance around it. Joan continues to shade Toni in front of Charles, insinuating that Toni is only with Charles because he has money. I thought you were okay with things, Joan. Come on, get into the kitchen, get the girls together, talk it out, and kick Charles out. If that's what you want, it's your birthday. Your girls want you to be happy. But is Joan also trying to please Toni by not sharing what she really truly feels because she doesn't want to hurt her friends' feelings? Is it better to humiliate each other and put each other down? Direct communication is tough, but the shade and saying nasty stuff, sometimes that can hurt so much that it could change the nature of a friendship. Of course, the night ends up going even more downhill because Charles mentions that he's ready for marriage, whereas him and Joan broke up because he wasn't ready for marriage, but all of a sudden he is, and that was just one short year ago. I noticed that Joan was able to have a direct conversation with Charles about her needs, whereas she wasn't able to have this with Toni. Joan finally admits that she was lying. She didn't like the situation between Charles and Toni. And of course, here comes Maya with the unnecessary digs. When there's a friend group and two people in the friend group are having an argument, it is important that the other members of the friend group are supporting and not throwing digs because that just can snowball the situation and make it even worse than it has to be. What could have been a cute night was really ruined by ineffective communication. I was really happy to see that Toni came to terms that her long-term relationship with her best friend was more important than this guy she didn't really seem to care about because Toni was really interested in his money. She would tell you herself. Later, Lynn moves in with Joan, and Joan mentions that it would have been great if Lynn could have asked permission for this. In my mind, as I'm watching that scene, I'm like, it's time to start setting some boundaries soon. It's time to start setting some boundaries soon because I'm seeing ineffective communication. You didn't say no, you couldn't move in. You said it would have been nice for her to ask. So she didn't ask. How do you rectify that? How do you set boundaries with a good friend of yours? You tell her exactly that. Hey, I want you to stay for 3 months and this is what I would like you to do. Let's split the responsibilities. Let's do a cleaning schedule, whatever the case is, because Joan seems bothered. She didn't say anything. You could tell in the way that she tells Lynn, hey, you should have asked, that she obviously wants to say more, but she doesn't. Again, a pattern of Joan being an ineffective communicator. Charles pays Joan a visit where he really shares with her what he should have shared with her a year ago. That he simply wanted a career before he settled down, which makes complete sense. Can you see how much ineffective communication can cost you?
Are you saying you want to get married?
Sure. Why not?
One very short year ago, that was completely out of the question. Because you didn't want to get married.
Well, no, not when it's being crammed down a brother's throat.
They were in a relationship that seemed to be going well because Joan even mentions that she still goes shopping with his mom. But he never really says, hey, I'm not ready for marriage. This is why. Because if they really wanted to continue that relationship a year ago, they should have probably spoken more about what was going on. Joan wanted marriage. He said, no, he didn't want it. Do you see how much ineffective communication costs? Because had Charles said, hey, I'm not ready for a relationship, then they could have kind of talked it out and determined what was beneficial for them. But it seems like Charles didn't really value the relationship that much to let her know that he wanted her to give him some time before they move forward and settle down. However, he was okay with dating her friend, coming to her party. So I'm not sure if he was that great of a guy. Would he even have come to Joan's house had Toni not kicked him out? I don't think he would have.
Oh, you can't suck her toes in mine, too.
Just grab hold of the headboard if you need to, baby. Fine.
Toni comes over to apologize to Joan, and it was so refreshing to see. I was happy to see that they chose each other. Friendship is very important. Community is very important. Charles was in it for himself, and they were in it for each other. We all make mistakes in friendships, but it's okay to learn and move on. However, if someone continues to do the same thing over and over, then it's not okay. We must all make an effort to be a good part of the community that we all want and need. It's important to have those direct conversations. Let people know exactly how you feel. Let people know when they've hurt you. Let people know when you're not okay with certain things, because what's going to happen is resentment is going to build and it's going to fester, and you're not going to have great outputs. Because cognitive behavioral therapy tells us the way we think affects the way we feel, which then affects the way we act. If we're thinking like this person is such a bad friend, then we're going to feel negative feelings and we're going to spew negative things. Whereas if we're able to let people know, hey, this hurt me, and it's going to be hard to be honest with someone you love to possibly hurt them. But it could also hurt them if you're not honest and upfront, because you're going to spew those negative things. So let's move forward to season 1, episode 3. This episode opens up with Toni buying Joan a pair of shoes that she's been wanting. And the episode progresses. The group is going out, but Joan is insistent that they wait for Maya. And Maya is Joan's new friend, her assistant at work. You can see Toni's here looking a little confused as to why they would be waiting for her. From what I've been picking up and what I've watched in the show before, Joan and Toni were besties since the 5th grade. Lynn joined them when Lynn came to college, and Maya when she became Joan's assistant at work. Toni even says it herself, when did this threesome become a foursome? And this is indicating her disdain for the widening of the friendship. Do friends get jealous? Yes, they do. Jealousy is a normal emotion. All humans experience it at some point. Jealousy in friendships are especially common. As soon as Maya comes in, her and Toni get into an argument. It happens so fast. I was just like, hold on. How did this happen so quickly? If you can remember in the episode when I talked about before, Maya was really upset at Toni for dating Charles. So there could be that underlying resentment there too. This is stemming from Toni's jealousy of Maya and Joan's budding friendship. And on Maya's side, she wasn't really too excited, and this is due to her belief that Toni lacks morals for dating Joan's ex, believing that Toni, broke the girl code. Toni and Joan end up arguing over what to do with Maya. What started out as a fun girls' night out is on the downward spiral. Joan takes Maya's side in the argument, and of course, Toni gets upset. Toni believes that since they've been friends since they were so young, that Joan should automatically always take her side no matter what the problem is. Joan's loyalty should lie with her. However, Maya is Joan's friend, and Joan has brought her into this friendship group, so she probably feels the need to ease her into the friendship and make her comfortable in the group. Since Maya and Toni already had some bad blood from the Charles situation, they should have probably discussed the outing and who was going to be there. This is one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm going out in a group of people I don't know. Who's going to be there? Let me know in the comments if you ask the same. Because personally, I like to know who's going to be there. I do. But knowing who's going to be there or not won't stop me from ever supporting a friend, of course. The ladies get to the club separately, but they get to the same place. And Toni's still refusing to believe that Maya has connections and that Maya has traveled to places. She just refuses to believe that. And that was a bit elitist. And that was a bit of Toni really looking down on Maya because of Maya's job and how Maya had a child when she was young. She turns her nose up to Maya. A fight ends up breaking out due to Toni defending Joan. Maya jumps in and Lynn jumps in. Y'all, again, Maya jumps in.
Some women don't get into girl fights either.
What do you expect me to do? Just jump in and start swinging?
Hell, Maya even had my back and she hates me.
After the fight occurs, Toni is extremely disappointed in Joan. She feels like Joan didn't have her back. And she feels like Joan hasn't been having her back all night against Maya and later against these people at the club, thus adding to the disappointment that she's been feeling in their friendship. Joan choosing Maya over Toni and Joan choosing safety over Toni. The fight at the club, I could see why Joan wouldn't jump in. After all, she's a lawyer and could be disbarred. That is her livelihood. Her life could go on a downward spiral for this. But because Toni had been feeling the rejection from Joan for a little while, she didn't really care about that. She just felt unloved. She felt like the person who wasn't chosen. Toni comes in to talk to Maya, which I thought was really sweet and really the right thing to do. Toni, even though it's the right thing to do, she kind of sort of thanks Maya for having her back. I hated to see that Toni just refused to believe that Maya traveled, and it's because Toni sees Maya as poor and lower class, someone that's beneath her. But enough, Toni. Let it go. Toni ends up leaving the office where Joan realizes that Toni was there, so she tries to run after Toni, but Toni is gone. Joan seeks advice from Lynn, and Lynn admits that she's also upset with Joan for not helping out, for not being supportive of that situation. But Lynn also admits that she can't be too upset at her because she lives with her. And I want to point something out here. Is Joan allowing people to trample or cross her boundaries because she also wants someone to always be on her side when things go down? Because Lynn clearly says it here. I'm upset with you, but I can't be too upset because I live with you. So if she's always allowing people to cross her boundaries, then she's always going to have people on her side when things go wrong. She then goes to her favorite restaurant to seek advice from the owner, who she's also friends with and is a patron of their business. Again, someone who could be biased in their advice. During this time, it could have really been beneficial for Joan to just call up Toni, listen to Toni's side of the story, and either apologize or agree to disagree and move on, or agree to disagree and halt the friendship. But I can see how tough it could be to agree to disagree and your friend decide not to move forward because they really feel like that you were wrong, but you refuse to back down because you feel like, hey, I don't want to fight. She wasn't ready for the possible outcome. Sometimes forcing a conversation that could potentially turn into an argument isn't the best thing or the best way to communicate. Sometimes it's best to give each other time and just wait. Time away is okay. Toni gathers the girls, Maya and Lynn, and they find Joan eating on her own. Toni and Joan end up talking where Toni explains her position. She essentially feels like Joan is drifting away from her. She's making these new friends. And she also feels like Joan is taking everyone's side but hers. Again, Toni and Joan have been best friends since childhood. So it's hard to see that friendship you once had evolve and include more people. So you're no longer each other's just go-to, and either you have my back and you agree or not. Things have changed. They make up, well, they agree to disagree and move forward in their friendship. If this is the parameters for their relationship, then it is what it is. It's their relationship. It's their decision to make. Be honest here. What do you do when your bestie ends up having a new bestie or invites another person to join your girl group? Feeling jealous is okay. It's a normal emotion to have. It's really how you express that emotion. To handle a friend's jealousy, it's important to communicate openly. It's also important that you validate each other's feelings and be sure to reassure them of their importance in your life, if that's still the case for you. It's also important to plan and dedicate time together apart from that new budding friendship. It's also important to help them understanding that their new friendship doesn't invalidate your friendship together. All right, so let's move on to season 1, episode 17, where they're discussing Lynn and her tendency to be a mooch. This episode opens up with Joan trying to discipline her friend and assistant Maya. This is a dual relationship and requires a set of good and strict boundaries. After all, someone's livelihood is at stake. Toni and Joan end up finding out that Lynn is applying for yet another graduate degree instead of getting a job. I personally love learning, and I could see myself getting a PhD at some point in life. Not anytime soon, but at some point. The ladies go on to discuss Lynn's need to get her own place. She needs to be on her own. She needs to stand on her own 2 feet. She's able-bodied and she is very smart, college educated. The ladies discuss Lynn's need for her own place and their frustrations of having to care for her financially. Is Lynn a mooch? What's a mooch? A mooch is basically a friend or a person that takes more than they share. Lynn is constantly living with her friends and they've had enough. The ladies meet for lunch and they stage an intervention. Are interventions beneficial? Well, yes, they can be. If the person being interventioned is receptive and you have their buy-in. During the intervention, it can be beneficial to use I statements. Honestly, an intervention can be hurtful. It can feel like everyone is against you. I have to acknowledge that. During Lynn's intervention, her friends are sure to tell her how much they love and care for her, but they can no longer financially support her. They let her know that she has to live on her own and get a job. In Lynn's mind, she had this all figured out, but her friends are tired. This is exactly where resentment can build in a friendship, when your friends feel like you're taking advantage of them. It's not fair. Like I said, Lynn appears to be an able-bodied person who is having a hard time applying the theories she's learned in school to her real life. What she believes is conflicting directly with working. But she's also benefiting from that very same system through her friends working. Toni ends up giving her an ultimatum. She has a week to find a job. Lynn ends up seeking out Joan when she can't find a job, as she thinks Joan is the one that would give in. Joan ends up sticking to the boundaries and says, "No, Lynn, you have to find a job." At least I thought she wanted to stick to the boundaries. Joan ends up giving Lynn a job. Here, Joan may think she's helping, but she might also be enabling Lynn. This is also dangerous in a friendship. Joan is tired of her living with her for free, so now she's working for Joan. Joan may not always have projects to give her to do. So what happens then when there's no more projects and she doesn't have any money? It can build resentment. All of the ladies end up staging an intervention for Joan because of her enabling behaviors. Even Lynn agrees that she's an enabler. Toni turns the conversation to Maya and Joan's dual relationship. Maya wasn't having that though, because that was messing up her good thing. She had a good relationship with Joan when it came to work. She didn't want to mess that up at all. But that was a great example from Toni. Joan again was feeling kind of like a savior because she saved Maya, a young mother who's going back to school. She needs Joan's help, of course. Lynn, someone else going back to school to get a degree. She needs Joan's help. Joan enjoys that feeling of being a savior, being needed, having people in her corner on her side. And like I mentioned before, Joan has that tendency of seeking support from people who may have a bias towards her. Lynn, who lives with her, and the restaurant owner who she's a patron of. Of course, Joan disagrees and says she just simply wants to help her friend. But to what end? Joan often expressed frustrations to helping Lynn and always has to have a talk with Maya about her definition of professionalism in the workplace. Joan's her boss, but Maya makes the rules. Yes, Joan is doing a great thing by hiring Maya and being understanding of her role as a young mother. However, some boundaries are needed there. Yes, you can be flexible about what time Maya comes into work. That's understandable. Things happen. But at some point, some things get a little bit annoying and Joan again might start to feel resentment. In that episode, they also showed that Maya was struggling with fibroids, and I'm glad they talked about that because that's such an important topic to be discussed and that affects Black women. But if Joan didn't want Maya tweezing her face at the desk, then she didn't want that. That was a boundary. You can be a great friend, care for others while maintaining healthy boundaries. People aren't going to be happy with you 100% of the time, but they're still going to be friends with you and they'll still respect you. Lynn ends up going missing because of all this is happening, and she is later found by Yvonne. Lynn advised that she was hurt, and I mentioned this before. When you stage an intervention for a friend, it can be hurtful. So I'm wondering if it would have been beneficial for them to have a one-on-one talk with her before they stage the intervention. Lynn comes to the realization that she does need a job. Toni talks Joan through conditions, aka boundaries. You could stay for 3 months, or if you fall on hard times. So how do you get your friend to stop mooching off of you? You need to learn how to say no. You need to set firm boundaries. You need to also follow through on those things. Boundaries are for you. If you find yourself growing resentful and the friend isn't respecting your boundaries, you may have to determine what that future looks like going forward for you and that friend. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you. As always, please do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe, and turn on your post notifications. That really helps me out. I look forward to chatting with you in the next one. Bye now.